Welcome back. This is the 10th episode of the Painted Privacy video series, and I'm the artificial avatar of Luca Bolognini, European data lawyer and essayist. In this episode, we will talk about Immaculate Conception, inventing ideas and leadership, that is, when data shines us. You certainly remember Giulio Romano, whose Birth of the Virgin I show you here in the lower right corner, also hanging behind me, which I discussed at length in my book, The Art of Privacy, regarding organizational models and DPOs. I would be doing the great artist a disservice if I reduced the metaphorical force of his subject to mere corporate functionalism, programmable like software code. In that scene, in reality, the birth of Mary is illustrated, the natural physical origin. In addition to analyzing its highly efficient organizational mechanisms, as I did in The Art of Privacy, we can also shift our gaze to the starting point, the ideal background, the imagination of an initiative, and its underlying invisible nature. Before organizing anything, in fact, we must first intuit it, invent it, and conceive it from scratch, much like the Madonna's Immaculate Conception. To continue with the religious allegory, she is imagined directly by God in all her purity and predestination before being concretely conceived and then brought into the world by Anna. I suspect that 9 times out of 10 this process of conception occurs almost by chance, as the result of sudden flashes of inspiration, desperation, or brainstorming of the creator's ideas and hopes, which nevertheless must always be accompanied by a close examination of the rules imposed by science and by legal, economic, cultural, social, and political institutions. This is true for an innovative startup today, just as it has always been true for all human enterprises. The virgin birth reminds us of this necessity to solve complex problems by combining off-the-cuff intuition with a predetermined system. In the case of the Virgin, the Immaculate Conception with the supernatural predestination that came before. Analyzing the image's backstory, we find an infertile couple who are suffering because they cannot have children and who are afraid of being lost with no solutions. Then, little by little, the two of them figure out a way forward. All this unfolds through seemingly impulsive gestures that appear to make no sense. Joachim secludes himself. He appears to throw in the towel, giving in to his despair, but I see his gesture as one of seeking silence, introspection, as an attempt to shut out the surrounding noise. A sort of hermit-like abstraction that helps him to rationalize things, data, in a lucid, balanced, and objective way. Anna embodies insistence, both emotional and suprarational, and prayer that rouses the unconscious so that the deepest desires can become reality. The two of them strip themselves of their useless riches, rendering them useful for the poor and needy. In other words, moving resources from where they are superfluous to where they are needed. Joachim and Anna's intuitive and sometimes impulsive behavior is revealed, in hindsight, to be coordinated and in harmony with the predetermination of God's plan. There is an invisible and unconscious pact between the sudden flashes of human insight and a broader, already planned system. Free and spontaneous intuition, much like an artistic gesture, is affected by the general, cultural, and natural, in this case also celestial and supernatural context, just as a canoe caught in the eddies of a flooded river is pulled by the current towards the sea. In the same way, the insights that guide us in theorizing a good strategy for solving the most difficult problems are sometimes instantaneous and lightning fast, true flashes of genius. For this energy to be transmitted from us to the world, however, we need the right environment and materials. Electricity does not flow if the atmosphere is not sufficiently free from conditioning and from insulating materials that obstruct the flow and prevent ideas from streaming out. After all, energy is made up of data, like the data that flows through fiber optic cables for fast internet connections, essential for our new ideas. For this reason, we must be the best possible conductors. Now I like to explore the kind of intelligence that guides a boss or a top manager in taking decisions and giving directions. Steering a ship through the stormy waves of business and innovation is about more than just occupying a position or a role or setting up a management system. It is essential to know how to gather, interpret, and enhance the data and metadata that the company produces, because it generates a wealth of information that it would be foolish and damaging to overlook. Analyzing data is synonymous with business intelligence, which, lo and behold, is a corporate formula that explicitly reminds us of the need for intelligence and intuition in pondering and making strategic decisions. Sometimes data has no regard for our personal wishes. It consists of facts, with raw, jagged edges, or at least other people's subjective snapshots. It bears down on us and slams into us like a freight train with its objective otherness. Other times, it confirms our objectives. You need to know how to read data, obviously. The more data we have, the more complicated things get, and at the same time, the more refined that data becomes. This is the magic of big data analysis, the gathering of enormous amounts of data through expert algorithms that can guide our choices almost in real time. The data makes us aware of what would otherwise remain obscure, or at the very least, not seen, not perceived, and therefore not rationalized. We might ask ourselves whether, by retreating into the desert, Joachim was seeking, or rather denying, this necessary search for data. After all, he withdraws from the world, isolates himself, and, faced with the evidence that he cannot have children, we could argue that he buries his head in the sand. As I said before, I prefer to think of that hermitage as a focalization choice. Away from the chaos of conformism and passion, human beings rediscover silence and an objective flatland of information on which to base their next steps. Each plan needs data and perspectives to take shape and develop. By retreating to pray in the desert, Joachim gathers information free from outside influences and processes by using his imagination in a way that is both dramatic and generative. Anna does the same, isolated within herself and in the presence of the angel, who comes to her like an intuition after so many years of futile attempts. It is true that at times there is a risk of too much data, all in a muddle, a storm, a fracas of information and notions that end up confusing our ideas. That is when the desert or the cloister can prove healthy and can help us select only data that is accurate and authentic. What is more, if data is analyzed correctly, with no unnecessary background noise, it does not normally remain in its original form. It merges with other data and generates new data that did not exist before. Newborn data can be the embryo of otherwise unthinkable inventions, of fantastical figures transformed into real creatures. Then finally, once the new idea arrives, the whole world begins to revolve around it. In the painting, this is represented by the newborn Mary, around whom an organized and virtuous circle of energies, resources, people, and processes are set in motion, just like a real company. This cannot help but recall the opening words of the Gospel according to John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. While not wanting to be disrespectful or blasphemous, I cannot help but equate John's word with data. It is hard to imagine leaders not having data available to validate or rectify their choices. Even the best organizations and the best bosses are not enough. Information is necessary to influence, confirm, or deny the dynamics and orientations, the harmonies and agreements, the checkpoints and route recalculations. Data gives off sparks, just like electricity, and can bring all kinds of initiatives to life. Data colors paintings, confers depth and perspective, and either averts or, conversely and counterintuitively, encourages reckless endeavors. Thanks for following this 10th episode of Painted Privacy, and see you next time with Luca Bolognini's artificial avatar.